As Drac walked down the clean, sterile corridor of the hospital wing he was in, he briefly checked his notes. Claimant requests 4,500 credits plus hospital costs for a case of indigestion. Drac smiled. His job as an insurance investigator was to ferret out false claims, and any claim over 200 credits almost always required verification. 4,500 credits plus hospital costs for a case of indigestion was absurd. Easy to deny. He just needed to get an official statement from the applicant before he could deny the claim. Applicant, John Marshall. Human. Ugh. Drac had dealt with humans before, and though most of them were pleasant enough, a few could be troublesome. Most of the serious issues his office had dealt with lately were in dealing with humans. Drac reached the end of the corridor and opened the door to the room that had the human known as John. Drac was stunned by what he saw, the man lying in a hospital bed, bandaged and groaning in pain. His face was puffy and bruised. He appeared to have lost some teeth, and it appeared that both his arms had been broken. Confused, Drac once again checked his paperwork. Yep, indigestion. He double-checked the room number, and again, he was correct.
John?
He began slowly. The human turned to look at Drac through one eye, as the other was purple and swollen shut. Yeah, John said, even his voice sounding like he was in pain. Putting on his business face, Drac strode forward and offered John a hand, but withdrew it when he remembered the human had no working appendages.
Hello? I am Drac de Nasser from Universal Life and Health. I'm here to follow up on your insurance claim due to your bout of, indigestion.
John blinked his good eye slowly, as if even this movement caused him agony. Yes, he replied. Indigestion.
I'm afraid I will need a statement,
Drac said.
as well as how indigestion caused you to claim such an unusually high amount of damages.
Drac was impressed that he was able to refrain from saying absurd amount. Oh, man, John groaned. It was like this. I was assigned to the garbage frigate Hauler 3 as the chief engineer. Drac nodded his understanding, taking notes as the human spoke. We were 3 days out of dock when the cook, a Talarian named Fluke, asked some of the crew if they wanted to try a delicacy from his homeworld. Sure, we all thought. Sounds great to us. Drac scribbled his notes as the human continued. He already had written the word denied in large capital letters across the top of his notepad. So we sat down to eat Fluke's feast, as he called it, John continued. You know, it tasted pretty good. I was not sure what was in it, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't until later that night when it began to hit us.
Please, continue,
Drac said. He really wasn't even paying attention at this point. So it hit the navigator first, an amphibian from Verloc 2. She was trying to plot a navigation course. She suddenly erupted in a geyser of vomit. Poor girl was mortified, trying to run off the bridge, trailing her gray-green remains of Fluke's feast from her mouth when she doubled over from stomach cramps. Here, John looked at Drac. Do you know how painful stomach cramps are when you have 4 stomachs? Poor thing was in agony. Anyway, as she was helped off the bridge, it hit the transit authority marshal next. His name is unpronounceable, so I just call him Bob. Anyway, Bob tried to make a dash for the lower decks, with the captain yelling after him, asking where he thought he was going. Bob turned around as if to try to explain when he too went off like a volcano, drenching a poor custodian with Fluke's feast, which sent that poor soul retching all over the place as well. Drax stared at the human before him.
What the hell was going on?
So, the captain turns to me to ask something, but I just shake my head, no, and head for the door. I felt a burning in my guts, you know what I mean? John asked. Drac nodded in agreement, even though he certainly did not know what he meant. He just needed to find out what was happening on this ship. I mean, my guts were freaking lava. I knew that I'd be yakking up everything I ate for the last week soon. Somehow I managed to make it to the head and spent the next 3 hours on my knees doing the old Technicolor yawn. Drac noticed John's eyes look haunted, as if the memory of this event was painful to him. I was drinking water, just so that I could have something come up. You feel me? John almost sounded like he was pleading. Drac just nodded. So, the whole ship went into lockdown. Each and every person who ate Fluke's feast was in agony, and that wasn't the end of it. Let me tell you, after vomiting, it started hitting the other end, if you catch my drift. Emergency buckets were placed in all corridors, where if a sick crew member couldn't make it to the head, they could just puke or do their business right there. Oh, it's awful. Drac could swear he almost saw a tear escape from Johnny's tightly closed eye.
I know this is difficult, but to make a decision, I will need you to continue,
Drac encouraged. Nodding grimly, John gathered his strength and carried on. After 3 solid days of this hell, he said, the crew was desperate. Every slight shift, every movement caused crewmates to either void their stomachs or make them run from the room, praying that they would make it to a bucket in time before they would ruin another uniform bottom. Drac was paying full attention now. Even if this was all a lie, it was the best story he'd heard in a while. So the navigator comes up to me, John continued. Her eyes were all bloodshot because she had popped some vessels dry heaving. She begged me, literally begged me, to do something to make the pain stop. What could I do? I wasn't a doctor, and the medic we had was suffering along with the rest of us. And then it hit me. Here, John paused a second and looked at Drac through his puffy eye. Now, remember, I hadn't slept in 3 days, he explained. I wasn't thinking with all my faculties. Drac nodded, almost dreading what John would say next. Well, so the navigator and most of the rest of us were in a bad way. She was begging me to make it stop. Begging, mind you. Drac just waited. With a sigh, John continued. Well, it was the slight movement that set everyone off, you see. So I got this idea that if movement were no longer detectable, like, say if the artificial gravity was turned off, it would make everything better, see? I mean, how can you get motion sick if there's no motion to speak of? See? See? Drax stood there, aghast.
Tell me you didn't.
I did, John wailed. I swear I thought it would make things better. I swear. I shut off the gravity. The second I did, people were spinning in the air everywhere. All you could hear was screams. Screams and retching, and worse, so much worse. John was almost crying now. The air was filled with floating pools of vomit. Crew members were voiding themselves everywhere. The smell, Lord have mercy, the smell haunts me to this day. With the last strength I had, I reactivated the gravity, sending people hurtling towards the floor to be covered in the vomit and the other fluids that were floating around just moments before. Drac was stunned.
So, that was the cause of your injuries?
Drac asked after a very long pause.
The fall when gravity was restored?
No, came a weak reply. The injuries were from death.
What is a teth?
Drac asked. Not what, a who. Teth was the head security officer, a Venid, 8 feet tall, all muscle and sinew.
Why would the head security officer attack you?
Drac asked incredulously.
Well, you see,
Teth had just happened to be walking down the main corridor when I shut off the gravity. The main corridor was the most used, you see, so there were, well, let's just say many, many buckets that had been used in that area. When the gravity stopped, all the buckets and Teth were thrown around like ping-pong balls. When the gravity came back on, I was told there was not a square inch of Teth that had not been covered in some sort of expelled bodily fluids. John looked up with agony in his good eye. Someone told him that I was the one to shut off the gravity, John finished. No other explanation needed to be given. Drac stood up over the limp, broken form that was once a man. He had already scratched out the word denied from his notes. Universal Life and Health would cover his hospital bills, but the 4,500 credits...
John,
Drac asked slowly,
why do you need the 4,500 credits?
John grimaced, his good eye squeezed tight in shame.
The captain,
John answered, is charging me for all the cleaning costs. As Drac left the hospital, he filled out the insurance investigation form. Claim approved. Reason, indigestion.